Live from Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Mark Summers, and now, here's your host, Dan Harary.
Wow, we had Mark Summers introduce me twice. That's probably never happened in the history of broadcasting. Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Harary. Thank you very... I'm hearing an echo. Race, I'm hearing an...
You're fine on our end, Dan.
I'm hearing everything twice. Everything is twice. Wow.
You got your headphones plugged into the bottom of that mic?
Yeah. Everything's playing back in my head.
You don't have any browsers open, do you?
Yeah. Wow.
Do you have like your show playing on YouTube?
No.
In another browser?
Let me see about that. No. I don't know.
X out of everything except StreamYard.
I think. Okay, passed.
Check 2.
I don't know what it is. Sorry, everybody.
Stand by, everybody. Dan, if you could, go down to settings.
All right. I figured it out.
Okay, good. Okay,
I figured it out. I'm so sorry. Well done.
You're fired.
I'm fired. Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. The last 2 weeks, I was really quite ill. I had a virus from hell. I had laryngitis. And this week, I'm feeling better. But I'm all for hoots today. And I really apologize to Nick Pope and to Race. Some of my wires were screwed up behind my computer. And anyway, I'm Dan Harary. Welcome to Paranormal Tonight. And I appreciate that you came here. I had laryngitis last week. I was going to interview last week Paul Hynek, but I had no voice. So I will interview Paul Hynek again in the very near future. In the next couple of weeks, I have quite a few very interesting guests coming up. So please stick with me. And this is a new show and it's a new experience for me. And I really appreciate everyone who's tuning in. I have a special shout out to some friends of mine this week, Serena DC and Michael Mazzola, some very notable documentary filmmakers, produced a very interesting live press conference presentation on Tuesday here in LA. And they presented some very old Peruvian bodies that have been scientifically proven to be a missing race of humanoid beings. They're 1,000 years old. And I was involved with that press conference. So Serena and Michael, if you're listening, I think you did a great job. And it was really fun to work with you on that project. Also, I just discovered a really wonderful TV show. You probably all know about it. I just discovered it the other day. Resident Alien. It's my new favorite TV show on Netflix. It's very funny. And if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. I'm going to try to get the star and the creator of that show on my show here, this podcast, very soon. Just quickly, I'm a longtime Hollywood publicist. I'm the author of 2 books, Flirting with Fame, my Hollywood book, and After They Came, my UFO sci-fi book. And I'm broadcasting from beautiful downtown Beverly Hills. This is my office in Beverly Hills. So there we go. Okay, we have a very special guest tonight, and I apologize for my screw-ups at the top of the show. For 21 years, Nick Pope worked for the UK Ministry of Defense, investigating UFOs and other mysteries, officially for the British government, leading the media to call him the real-life Fox Mulder. One of his postings was to a division where his duties included researching and investigating the UFO phenomenon to assess the defense, national security, and safety of flight implications. Because of his work on these real-life X-Files, Nick has worked as a consultant or spokesperson on numerous UFO and alien-themed movies, TV series, and video games. Nick is a regular contributor to various TV news shows and documentaries, including, of course, we all know and love Nick from Ancient Aliens. He's also on The Basement Office and After Contact, the latter of which he created and hosts. He also moderates Ancient Aliens Live, which is a live touring event based on the successful TV series. Nick is also a member of the board of directors of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, which was founded by myself and by Stephen Bassett last year, 2023. And it's an honor for me to have Nick on the board of directors for the HDA. A few months before my book, After They Came, was published, Nick was kind enough to give me a very lovely book review quote, which I'd like to read right now because it meant the world to me. Dan Harary's book, After They Came, is an entertaining and upbeat work of sci-fi that cleverly incorporates key parts of the UFO phenomenon's lore and backstory. It's a delightful tale of wonder and hope. And I put that little piece, A Delightful Tale of Wonder and Hope, on the cover of my book, After They Came. And again, I can't thank him enough. Anyway, Grace, let's bring in everyone's favorite Brit, Mr. Nick Pope. Let's bring him on. And hello there.
Hey there. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Nick. Thank you very, very much for doing this. I'm sorry I was so verhutzt at the start of the show.
No apology necessary. When you're sick, you're sick. There's nothing you can do about it.
I just got better a couple of days ago. So, first of all, how are you doing in New York? And how are you and your wife doing there? And how long? I think you're moving back to the Midwest later this year. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes. Elizabeth and I have been in New York City since August last year. We're here because she's actually got a visiting fellowship with a think tank called Heterodox Academy. And it's a 1-year fellowship. So yeah, we're over 6 months into that. We're loving life in New York City. We're right in the heart of Manhattan, on 7th, pretty close to Times Square and pretty close to Macy's. So it's the city that never sleeps. And at the end of August, we go back to our main home, which is Tucson, Arizona,
Right.
which we love, of course.
That's right. Were you at Times Square for New Year's Eve?
We went through it, but we actually went to a 70s and 80s retro club to do some dancing. Elizabeth's sister was up with us as well, and I think it's just called the Retro Club. Actually, it's somewhere up. I think it's off Madison and 47th, something like that.
That's great. That's great. Many of us, I have my little spiel I got to read here. Many of us who are interested in ufology, of course, know about your work at the Ministry of Defense, your appearances on Ancient Aliens and many other shows and documentaries, and you as the host of Ancient Aliens Live. If you don't mind, I'd like to first ask you a little bit about you personally. Where are you from? What kinds of hobbies and interests did you have as a child and a teen, young adult? And what were you doing, Nick, in your life before you joined the Ministry of Defense?
Well, I was brought up in the UK, and we were a kind of regular family. We liked our outdoor walks, things like that. The countryside. I was actually, although I moved to London when I was about 14 or 15 because of my father's work, we actually, for my early years, grew up in a fairly small village in the county of Surrey. So we did all the outdoor things, riding the bikes and playing the soccer on the local fields and going for long walks, things like that. So just nothing special. No. People often say, when did you get interested in UFOs or science fiction? Really, the answer is I didn't. I mean, I really did not get into this whole subject of UFOs until I was assigned that position as one of the postings that I had in my 21-year career at the Ministry of Defense. But the Ministry of Defense, and for those that don't know, I should say that I was a civilian employee there, and that the Ministry of Defense is the UK's equivalent of the Department of Defense here in the US. And my father was actually very senior in the Ministry of Defense. He was an aeronautical engineer, and he was also a director of the Royal Aeronautical Establishment at Farnborough, where they have the famous air show, the Farnborough Air Show, of course. So one of my other childhood interests was aircraft. And then when I was at school, when you had to join the cadets when you were about 14 or something, and you could either join the Army or the Air Force. Well, I joined the Air Force cadets, of course, because that would give me the opportunity to fly. And literally age 14 or 15, I found myself learning the theory of flight, studying all the things that you have to study, and then actually getting some flights on the dual control aircraft that the Royal Air Force had as their basic trainer. And these little aircraft were called chipmunks. They flew you up to 3,000 feet. And bear in mind, like I say, I was 14 years old. They fly you up to about 3,000 feet, or maybe 1,500, can't remember which. And it's dual control. And then they say, you have control. And you say, I have control, sir. And you're flying.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of fun. That was
great,
fun, right?
Great fun. But obviously my father being in the Ministry of Defense, it was almost like the family firm, we joked. So I followed him into that and never once regretted it.
What did your father do there?
Well, like me, you get moved around, so you never do one thing. So he was an aeronautical engineer, but his specialisms were things like structures, materials, aerodynamics. They have one of the world's largest wind tunnels at Farnborough. So, but also he was involved in, how shall I put it, special projects, special weapons, that sort of thing. He served as Assistant Chief Scientific Advisor, Special Projects, then Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor, which, because the Chief Scientific Advisor is always an outside posting, is basically the senior government scientist in the Ministry of Defense. So he also was awarded, he did a lot of international collaborative work with NATO and particularly with the United States. And in fact, one of the awards that he was given was the US Secretary of Defense Medal for Outstanding Public Service. And that was to do with some I think it was counter-proliferation on maybe the chemical and biological side.
Did your father help you get your job at the MOD?
No, not at all. That would be totally improper. He obviously, through talking about his work or those aspects of his work that he was able to discuss. I mean, even within the family, you don't discuss classified work.
Right.
So he'd said enough that I thought, I want to work for my country, as opposed to, say, work for a corporation where I'm just putting dollars in somebody's wallet, even though typically government jobs aren't as well paid. But the idea that you'd be working for your country, that you'd be doing fascinating things that you'd go home and you'd see on the evening news, and of course, as the old saying goes, some things that you will never see on the evening news because they're so sensitive.
That's interesting. I don't know that you're aware of this. My father, you might know this, my father was an electronics engineer and a physicist for the U.S. Army at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey for 45 years.
Ah, right.
And he did top secret work. He never discussed his work ever. And along the way, and then after he died, I discovered my father helped to invent and design military drones and all kinds of different missiles and radar systems. And he used to go to White Sands Missile Testing Range quite often. He gave talks at the Pentagon. And it's kind of funny, Nick, after my dad passed away in 2017, I called my mother and I said, did Dad ever talk about aliens or UFOs at all? And she said in the early 1950s, at Fort Monmouth Army Base. They took him into the vault, my father, deep into the vaults, and they showed him something top secret. And my mother said he came home. This is probably 52, 53. He came home. She said he was pale and nervous and shaking. And she said, honey, what's wrong? My father said, I saw something today. It's above top secret. I can never tell you as long as I live. And my dad never told anyone. So my theory, Nick, is that perhaps it was a piece of a saucer or some technology. I don't think it was a body, but my dad was a genius engineer, and I think he may have seen some technology, and I think perhaps he might have been involved in the reverse engineering process for some of the technology, because I know my father was helping to design military drones. That I have proof of.
Right.
So it's kind of, you and I, and then Paul Hynek's father was J. Allen Hynek. So, you, me and Paul Hynek, we all have something in common,
Yeah, the family business.
Sort of.
Secrets.
Absolutely. So in your earliest days at MOD, when you first started your job there, what did they tell you your job was? And at what point did you realize, oh my God, I'm on the inside track of UFOs and these sightings and these incredible phenomena?
Well, I had 3 different postings before I was assigned to that particular department. So I had done completely unrelated things for the first part of my career. But then during the first Gulf War, the Persian Gulf War, I was seconded into the Joint Operations Center and worked for a particular manager there. And I was due for a move, and he had a vacancy coming up. And he said, well, why don't we just do an internal swap? Because he was in the same section, but a different part of it. And I said, fine, let's do that. And I said, what's the job? And he said, UFOs. So the rest is history. And yeah, I started off, obviously, one of the first things you do, you have a week where you shadow your predecessor. So you just sit alongside your predecessor and, he's doing the job, and then you gradually take over. And by the end of the week, you're doing the job. So then one of the first things that you have to do is obviously read the entire back archive of files, so that you really read yourself into absolutely everything that you have on this. But then there's no substitute for actually doing the investigations as the cases come through. And we had 200 or 300 each year. So you have to, just get stuck into that. And obviously some of them are pretty mundane, and most of them, of course, turn out to be misidentifications of fairly ordinary objects and phenomena, but some don't. And yeah, that's fascinating. But also, of course, it's not just the investigations. It's one of those odd jobs where there are really, very few people who have that deep specialist knowledge on it. So very quickly, I found myself being the subject matter expert on that. And the subject matter expert, I was in the junior managerial grade at the time, called executive officer. And there were people much more senior than me who never, for example, got to brief defense ministers on this, or write defensive lines for the public affairs people to put out to the media. But as the subject matter expert, if this issue was raised in Parliament, I was the one that had to draft the speech for the SecDef or whoever it was to stand up in Parliament and deliver. So it really, you were thrown in at the deep end for sure.
Wow. Did you go into that job, Nick, as similar to J. Allen Hynek? He was a skeptic for some time, and then along the way, he was like, wow, some of these things are literally inexplicable. And he slowly and surely became a believer. Would you equate yourself along those lines?
Yes, I think so. Though I don't even now characterize myself as a sort of true believer. I try to always take a data-led approach and an open-minded mindset with this. So I go where the data take me, and if the data say, well, look, this is just fire lanterns or drones, that's fine, case closed. But if it's something more interesting, absolutely focus on that.
You're open to the possibility of possibility of an extraterrestrial explanation.
Oh, for sure, yes. And despite the skeptical report from the Pentagon last week,
Right.
I think that behind the facade of having to say that, we know, and I've met some of them, that there are people in government, in the military, in the intelligence community who are similarly minded, that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is not off the table, despite what was put out last week.
Right, absolutely. What's your feeling about David Grush?
Well, I haven't met him, but I know a number of people who do know him, and I mean, it's important for people to know. You know, when for example, people hear some of the people say, well, he's never seen anything himself, and he's just talked to a load of people, and people use that phrase, he's talked to a bunch of people, as if it's just sort of, I don't know, he's gone down to his local bar or something and started
Right.
chatting about it. But what they don't seem to realize, or what they do realize but don't say, is that he went to talk to a load of people because he was tasked to do that, whilst part of the intelligence community cohort making up the UAP task force. He was part of the UAP task force when Jay Stratton was the director, and he was representative of actually two different agencies, National Reconnaissance Office and National Geospatial Intelligence. So the people that he went to talk to them because he was tasked to do that as part of his formal position on the UAP task force. So the 40 or so people that he spoke to were themselves people inside the system.
Right. It's not like he was talking to his barber and his dentist.
No.
Right. Right. I understand. We have to take a break in a few minutes, but could you quickly give us maybe some of the highlight UFO UAP cases while you were at MOD? Unusual, bizarre, very strange. And would Rendlesham Forest be among that crowd?
Yes, Rendlesham Forest, December 1980. So before my time, but I did a cold case review of the whole incident. That was probably the best case in our files, particularly because we had trace evidence. This thing was tracked on radar, left burn and scorch marks on the ground and on the trees, and left radioactivity levels that were significantly higher than the average background. And that's not disputed. That's in the declassified Ministry of Defense file from the government scientists. Then we had a case called the Calvine incident, very famous Scottish case involving a diamond-shaped UFO photograph. I talked about that on Ancient Aliens last week, actually, in the Mysteries of Scotland episode. And a case from 1993 called the Cosford incident, which was right in the middle of my posting there. Again, amazing case with a huge triangular-shaped craft seen over a period of about 6 hours over different parts of the UK. That's
fabulous. When people have said over the years, you know, Rendlesham was that lighthouse, the light from that beacon that was going around and around. It's so obviously not the case, and so many people have fell for that. Was that part of your case file with the lighthouse?
We found it helpful. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. Part of my job, of course, was to downplay the extent of our interest in this and our involvement. And we found the lighthouse theory a sort of useful thing to just throw out to kind of get people to back off and shut up, frankly.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a little break, pay some bills, run some commercials. I think it's about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and we'll be back with Nick Pope right after these messages.
Unlock the mysteries of the spirit realm with the new book, Meeting Wallace. In this channeled work by renowned psychic medium Larry Costa, the reader will delve into the profound wisdom of his spirit guide, Wallace. Together, they share the transformative journey of harnessing psychic powers from the celestial plane. Discover the extraordinary psychic gifts that have empowered Larry on his path, and immerse yourself in a thought-provoking and awe-inspiring read. Meeting Wallace is a groundbreaking endeavor, and it is a perspective seen through the eyes of a spirit guide. Discover the wisdom of the spirit realm alongside actual photographs of ghosts and spirit guides. Get the book Meeting Wallace by Larry Costa at Amazon.com.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UnX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
And welcome back to part 2 of Paranormal Tonight. I'm Dan Harary. We're a very, very special guest star tonight is Nick Pope. Let's bring Nick back in, please. Hello again. Thank you for bearing with us for that little commercial break. Nick, you've been called the real-life Fox Mulder, and X-Files was probably one of my all-time favorite TV shows. What did you think about that show? And did you ever meet David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, or Chris Carter?
I loved the show, and I met all three of them. In fact,
Wow.
I met them because I had some involvement with the show. I think you mentioned at the top of the hour in my bio the fact that I had done some consultancy and spokesperson work on various movies, TV shows, and video games.
Right.
Well, I got involved actually in some spokesperson work for the second X-Files movie and for one of the DVD box set compilations of Chris Carter's favorite episodes. He picked one from each season, something like that. And so I did a whole bunch of interviews to talk about that, talk about my love of the show, and to talk about how it tied in with real life government work on UFOs and the unexplained. So one of the things that I then got to do was go to the London premiere of the movie, where I met all three of them, and of course, when I met Chris Carter for the first time, it was like, oh yeah, I had the job where I investigated UFOs for the British government. And he said, oh yes, he said, I know all about that. And of course he had, as we later found out, he had been researching this subject in great depth for some time, sort of sitting at the back of UFO meetings, that sort of thing. But he knew about the British government's UFO program, of course, and that was one of the reasons why I got asked to get involved in this spokesperson role.
That's great. Please tell me you have a photo of you and David and Jillian and Chris together.
Somewhere or the other. Well, there's definitely one of me and David.
I would love to see that sometime
for sure.
Really
I'm pretty sure that Jillian was quite heavily pregnant at the time,
right.
So I think she had to kind of do a quick hello goodbye. But yeah, we got to hang out with David for quite some time.
That's great. Well, they wrote Jillian's pregnancy into some of the episodes.
Sure.
Yeah. Who do you remember when you first heard that you were the real life Fox Mulder? Do you know where that came from?
I can't quite place it, but I think it was some journalist who was writing up my story as a sort of profile piece, and then was just struck by the parallel. And at first, I mean, all this now is some time ago, but at first I think I was a little irritated because I was like, hey, this was a government job, not a sci-fi series. But then I realized, look, you can't be too precious about this. And I of course, came to love the X-Files. And then I thought, hey, own it. Why not? If they're gonna call you that, own it.
That's terrific. I think that's great. I love that. I would love to see that photo one day. I really, if you find it. Of course, we all know and love you from Ancient Aliens. Quick story about myself. I first got interested in ufology, Nick, around 2007. And I had just heard about MUFON for the first time, 2007. I didn't know what MUFON was. So I joined the local LA MUFON chapter. And I got very lucky. From a very, very first meeting ever in my entire life at MUFON, Giorgio Tsoukalos was the guest speaker,
right.
Giorgio. And he did like 90 minutes about ancient alien theory. And Nick, I knew none of this. My parents, my rabbi, and my teachers from when I was a kid. Well, I didn't know any of these things, the petroglyphs and the cave drawings and the Stonehenge and the crop circles and the pyramids and the pyramids in Mexico, and it just Betty and Barney Hill, and just Travis Walton. Nick, I was like this, like 90 minutes, like tears. And at the end, I went up to him. I said, Giorgio, that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I shook his hand. I think I hugged him. I said, you just changed my entire view of the world. And he goes, cool, thanks, man.
Right.
And I've met him many, many times since then. How did you first meet Giorgio, and how did you become part of the Ancient Aliens TV show?
Well, I had been on some episodes of Ancient Aliens over the years, but in around, and then of course that was starting off when I lived back in the UK, but then I moved over to the US in January of 2012, and in about 2015, 2016, the late Kevin Burns, the creative genius behind, not just Ancient Aliens, but so much else, basically, the way I heard it was he turned to his assistant and said, we need Nick in the show more. And then, so from that time onwards, I found myself doing more and more episodes. And then we had a thing called Alien Con, which was like
Sure.
kind of based on Comic-Con
Sure.
and all these big conventions, but was a mix of ancient aliens, but also some sci-fi as well. Some of the early ones, we had some of the actors from Star Trek from Doctor Who, from Lost in Space, various different people. But and so of course I had met Giorgio occasionally, doing the episode of Ancient Aliens, but there it was kind of, I'd go in for an episode just as he was coming out from his, so it was again a quick hello goodbye. Then got to see each other a bit more at Alien Con, those events, and sit on some panels together, including the so-called super panel, which Kevin Burns loved to moderate on the Saturday night. But
Right.
then it was Ancient Aliens Live became a thing. And I think originally the plan was to have Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Childress, and William Henry. But then at some point, Travis Taylor and myself were brought in, and I was brought in actually as moderator. Now, of course, you cannot do a live touring show and not get much closer to the people than you've ever got, say, when you're filming together.
Sure.
Where if it's a movie, you've got different scenes. If it's a documentary, you have different interview slots. But Ancient Aliens Live, we've done 40 shows. We've got another, I think, 26 on the website for spring and summer. We tend to do runs of 4 shows. It's a 90-minute live show. We can tour all around the United States, and of course, you really bond with the rest of the team doing that, and it's great fun.
That's very cool. What's it like for you? I don't imagine that when you joined the MOD, that one day in the future you would be a UFO rock star, and you'd have fans lining up to meet you and shake your hand and take your photo with you. What is that like for you, Nick, personally? Is it fulfilling? Is it a little bit embarrassing? What's that like?
It's very odd. I mean, you're right though with your question. When I joined the Ministry of Defense, of course, particularly when you do jobs that involve classified work, you're living your life in the shadows, and the whole point is that you stay under the radar, and then so to have the narrative flip like this and to be in the public eye,
Yeah.
is it's quite strange, but I love it. I get that Ancient Aliens has the most amazing fans, and not just fans, but super fans, who will watch every episode, who will come to the live shows, who will spot the memes and the catchphrases, and they'll really engage with that. And so when I meet people who love the show, I always try and stop for a photo, sign things, have a chat, where, as long as I'm not rushing for a plane or something. I don't want to miss a flight. But people stop me in the street all the time now, and it does take some getting used to, but people are great with it, and I'm happy to like I say, pose for photos and have a little chat about things.
That's so cool. Are your parents still alive?
No, they're not. No.
Did they live to see that their son became a world famous UFO rock star?
No, they didn't, and I'm not sure.
Could you imagine your father's reaction? I mean,
I'm
something.
not sure it would have been quite his thing.
He would have said, "Hey, where did I go wrong? Was such a nice boy. Where did I go wrong?" Have you ever been, speaking of Travis, I know Travis Taylor's a friend of yours. Have you ever been to Skidwalker Ranch?
I've not. We've talked about arranging it, but obviously it's that will be up to Brandon Fugel, and obviously they're filming the TV series there. I'd love to go, so maybe the opportunity will arise. But of course, Travis is busy doing that and doing a whole bunch of other things as well. But Travis is great, and Travis is he's one of the other people, of course, who has a kind of government background himself. So
Sure.
it's we all get on the show, but inevitably when you have someone like Travis who's also done government work, you speak the same language. It's like when people in any field get together. It's like when cops get together, or ex-military get together,
Sure.
or publicists get together, right?
Sure.
You've got your own.
Boy, I wrote a hell of a press release last week. Yeah, you think you did a good press release? You should have seen mine. Yeah, you're right.
So, but yeah, you have that language. So Travis and I, sometimes on the show we've stayed up after the show, have a celebratory drink or two, and swap stories about some of the crazy things that go on in government.
Well, my daughter Anjali, she's on the chat here over the side there, but she and I, we watch the Skinwalker show religiously, and we've greatly enjoyed it. And I'd love to meet Travis at some point. He seems like a very cool guy.
He's a fascinating guy, super smart, of course.
Sure.
And yeah, he's doing some amazing work there, as are the rest of the team. Some really bizarre things going on by all accounts.
Absolutely. Now, here's a very big question, Nick. I'm sure you've been asked this, but I don't know the answer. Have you personally ever seen a UFO?
Sadly, no. It's a little bit unfair, I think. I'm due a sighting, surely, you would think, having investigated hundreds, if not thousands, of other people's sightings. But no, never seen a thing myself. So bring it on. I mean, come on. Particularly when I go back to Tucson, with the clear skies and the beautiful viewing conditions there, that's the place for it.
That's great.
Much as I'd love to have a New York City sighting like John Lennon did and Muhammad Ali.
I just was going to say that, John, I only heard about, I'm a huge Beatles fan, and John in particular. I just recently heard about the John Lennon UFO sighting. That wasn't very, very famous at the time, but
right. I think he was with May Pang at the time, and
right.
They were up on the roof terrace.
My best friend in the world owns a nightclub in New York called the Cutting Room, and his best friend in the world is May Pang. So I have to ask my friend Steve to ask May Pang. I will, about the John Lennon sighting. That's very good. I didn't know that. That's very cool. Something else I wanted to ask you, since there are so many crop circles in the UK, and I think you and I spoke about this a little bit recently. What's your personal feeling about crop circles?
I'm going to be very unpopular here, I'm sure, but I'm pretty skeptical about those. I've seen people make some pretty amazing ones, and until and unless I see, and I know people talk about changes at the cellular level, but until I see that written up in a peer-reviewed paper and published in Science or Nature, I'm kind of, I'm not really sold on that, to be honest. That doesn't mean that they're not beautiful and amazing, and I've been in some of them. I was one of the first people, for example, in the Julia set, I believe, which was, I'm trying to think, maybe 1996, the one by Stonehenge.
Wow.
Amazing formation in the shape of a fractal, so a mathematical symbol and shape. And I was one of the first people in that formation. But I have yet to be persuaded.
Do you know, I think her name is Patty Greer, the crop circle researcher.
I know Patty, yeah.
Because
she'll probably want to wring my neck after that. But
she'll want to wring your neck, Dick, because I just saw a documentary she was in. She says, which was I'd never heard before, there's some kind of energy that comes up from underneath the earth. Everyone thinks it's ETs coming down. She says there are these balls of energy up from under the ground, hover. One swirls this way, the other swirls the opposite, and they sort of are, laser etching these things. And she felt pretty strongly. You might want to have a conversation with Patty Greer.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know Patty quite well, so I'll have to sit down and have this out with her.
That might be interesting, dueling crop circle point of views,
But I have to call it how I see it, and
Yeah,
I'm
of course.
not one of these people that's going to go, "Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Completely believe that." I mean, like I said at the outset, I'm very kind of data led. I try to not come into anything with preconceived ideas, either for or against. But I'm still okay, persuade me kind of guy.
I think that's a terrific way to be, and I appreciate your honesty. You could have said, "Oh yeah, I've seen 50, 60 UFOs." You're like the most famous person on the planet who studies UFOs who never saw a UFO. It's just, you're right. It's not fair. I've seen 3.
Oh,
I've
well.
seen 3 personally. So you definitely do at least one. Race, can we put that first slide, number 1, please? There you go. So Nick, I first met you here. That was at Alien Con last year.
Oh, yeah, Pasadena, right?
Pasadena. It's first time. Now, you had been kind enough to help me with my book quote a few months before this, but this is the first time you and I met in person. And you signed my book, and I have it in a very prestigious place in my living room. So everyone, "Oh, Nick Pope, you know Nick Pope?" Yeah, I know Nick Pope.
Yeah,
So that was very cool.
And there we are behind the curtain, literally.
And I think if you remember why, it was like you were kind enough to do this for me because you didn't want the other people to see, and it was a whole thing. Anyway, but that's a great picture.
Well, I think I was supposed to be signing posters and doing photos with people, so I had to sneak out the back and do a quick yeah.
This is like in the back out. Dan, don't tell anybody. Nick, can I? Yeah, don't tell anybody. So that was on the QT, but it's a lovely photo, and I appreciate it. Race, can we see the next one? So, Nick, you and I recently had a very nice dinner with our friend Jeff Stein at Musso and Frank, the famous Musso and Frank restaurant in Hollywood. I represent them, and I think we all had a very nice time that evening. That was a few months ago.
Yeah, amazing. What a storied restaurant that is.
And you said the nicest thing, which I told the owner, Nick. You told me at the end, you said, "Dan, I could check this off my bucket list now." And that was so cool that you said that.
Yeah.
That was great. At the dinner, I think you told me, I was not mistaken if I was 2 martinis in, but you told me a story about your workplace in the UK, that it was haunted, something in the basement or deep in the basement.
Yes.
Well, there was some paranormal stuff. What's your take on paranormal ghost kind of stuff?
Well, here's the story, and it's really interesting. If you look at a picture of Ministry of Defense main building, it's a very modern looking, kind of monolithic, kind of white stone, green copper roof, Stalin-esque architecture. But it's built on the site of the old Whitehall Palace. Right. And so if you go from ground level down a couple of levels, there's one point where suddenly you go from all these sort of modern offices and computer rooms and all of that, and you find yourself, you almost think you've done a time slip or something. You are literally in a medieval kind of setting, and you literally are, because it is the old wines. It's called the Henry VIII wine cellar, but it dates back before even Henry VIII, which was 16th century, dates back before that, and it's reputed to be haunted. And I've not seen anything myself, but the security guards who do the patrolling, who most of whom are sort of fairly tough old retired army types or police types, security guards have said that they've seen things down there, shadowy figures walking through the walls, that sort of thing. And one time, the Ministry of Defense in-house magazine called Focus ran a ghost story from somebody who'd been on patrol, actually not in main building, somewhere else, but finished off the article by saying something like, or the letter said, "We wouldn't normally publish a letter like this, but we thought it was so interesting that we'd break precedent and do it. Has anyone else seen anything?" And they got the biggest post bag, that they'd ever received. So it was amazing. But yeah, under Ministry of Defense main building is the Henry VIII wine cellar, supposed to be haunted. People hold their leaving parties in there. So when my father retired from the Ministry of Defense, he had his farewell drinks there, and then later on I had mine.
That's great. Race, can you take down that photo now, please? There he goes. That's great. I very quickly, Nick, I don't think you know this. I have a book coming out in May called My Paranormal Life. And I've had ghosts, poltergeists, angelic voices telling me things in my ears that came true. I've had light bulbs go off over my head, almost literally, that became major businesses, money. I mean, my whole, starting from the age of 5, I've looked back. So I'll get you a copy next time I see you, but it's called My Paranormal Life. It's my whole history of the weirdness, my UFOs, all that kind of stuff. In February, you spoke here in LA at the Conscious Life Expo. I was in your audience, and you gave a talk about disclosure. And you were saying some things, Nick, that differ pretty dramatically from that opinion of my friend Steve Bassett. Steve Bassett, who has become literally one of my best friends in the world. He's like, disclosure, there'll be angels like angels still singing and dancing, and cherubs dancing in the street, little kids, and doing hula hoops, and everything's going to be ponies and rainbows. And you were like, I think disclosure, let's be careful what we wish for, because perhaps it might not be all of that. So tell us a little bit about your disclosure POV.
Yes, I've never bought into this. It's all going to be rosy in the garden and all that, because if that was the case, I don't think there would be any difficulty with any of this. And yet we've seen there clearly is a difficulty. So I think people should be careful what they wish for, because I think it's, to me, I can't help but think that this, like most things in life, comes with a dark side. And I mean, for just even on the practical sense of it, let's suppose that this is true and that we find that there's a spaceship kicking around in the basement of the Pentagon somewhere, and we bust it out, and all the technology gets kind of put into the public domain. Well, almost certainly one of the few good assumptions you can make about aliens is that their technology would be orders of magnitude above and beyond anything we have.
Sure.
And anything that you'd need for viable interstellar travel in terms of propulsion system almost certainly involves the generation of very large amounts of energy. And anything that involves large amounts of energy can be weaponized. So, we might want to be a little bit careful before we say, just put it all out in the public domain. Because, again, for the people that say, well, the American people have a right to know. When you tell the American people, you also tell the leadership in China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all the terror groups,
Sure,
like ISIS and Hamas. So we should be careful with all this.
It's very interesting, because I totally appreciated what you said at your lecture. And every time I talk to Stephen Bassett, Dan, disclosure's coming. It could be tomorrow. It could be tomorrow. President Biden's going to go on TV. It's going to happen. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'm like, and I actually said, Steve, have you spoken to Nick Pope recently about this topic? You might want to, maybe meet each other a little bit halfway. But
yeah, I think so. I mean, I've known Steve for years, and
Sure.
Of course, I like him. We get on. In fact, we exchanged a couple of emails today. But but we agree to disagree on this, I think.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Just a quick plug. I'm the publicist for Contact in the Desert. Anyone who's watching out there, please be sure to get your tickets. Nick Pope will be there, and Steve Bassett and Richard Dolan and all the UFO rock stars will all be speaking this year. ContactInTheDesert.com. Little plug for them, because they're my friends as well. I think I have time, Nick, for one last question. You're a member of the board of directors of my group called the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, which Steve Bassett and I created last year. I think we have about 150 members now. A number of people are based around the world. We're having an event this Sunday in LA called the Making of Project Blue Book with Paul Hynek and the producers of that show itself. And if you were in town, of course, I would have dragged you kicking and screaming to attend. But next time you're in LA, please let me know. What are your thoughts about how Hollywood historically, has portrayed aliens and ETs? Usually it's, they come to kill us and eat us. But what do you think Hollywood's role could be in the disclosure movement? And where do you see perhaps the group like the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, where we might make some progress in the future?
Well, I think it's been a mixed bag with Hollywood, but obviously things like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and really thoughtful pieces of science fiction like Contact and Arrival have, I think, been brilliant for this subject. What I think the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance can do and is starting to do is draw together actors, directors, writers, agents, publicists, so that next time, instead of Hollywood, the studio making a movie about all of this, let's let the people that know about it shape that movie from the very outset, rather than coming in at the end and just doing a little bit of publicity or something. Get us in at the ground level and make a movie that reflects the reality of this. And also, I think the really intriguing questions of what happens next, because it's the societal impact of this that most interests me at the moment, not the sort of skeptic versus believer dogfight about what this is. Let's get over that and say, well, if it happens, what then? And I'd like to see the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance working with a major studio to craft something that will tell that story, so that we can all think about it before it happens, and that way we'll be ready for it when it does happen.
That's wonderful. Nick, you should be the publicist for HDA instead of me. That was the greatest thing I ever heard. I'm going to have to route that little speech to everyone I know on the earth. Nick, what's just a minute and a half? What's left for you this year? What do you have coming up? Any new projects? I know you're still going to be on tour in the next few months. Is that right?
Yes, we've just wrapped the new season of Ancient Aliens, so some new episodes coming up. I'm speaking at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference. Then, of course, as you mentioned, Contact in the Desert, the amazing 10th anniversary one, and Ancient Aliens Live. And the website for that is ancientalienslivetour.com. And people can see if we're coming to your city or near.
Great. That's wonderful. And last question, Nick, how can people reach you? Or Instagram, Facebook? How would you like to be contacted if anyone has questions for you?
My website is nickpope.net, and I have contact details on there. And my X, formerly known as Twitter, is the social media platform I'm most active on. I am at Nick Pope MOD for Ministry of Defense, at Nick Pope MOD.
When you said my ex, I thought, oh, I didn't know Nick had an ex-wife. Really? Oh, okay. Nick, thank you very, very much. I so appreciate it. I really, your friendship with myself means the world to me. And I hope to see you soon next time you're in LA. If not, I'll see you at Contact for sure.
Thanks.
And I appreciate that you stayed up till the middle of the night because you're in New York. And I know it's late for you, so go to sleep. And please tell Elizabeth I said hello. Thank you very, very much.
Will do. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. And everyone, that's it for tonight's show. Live from Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. Next week, a week from tonight, I will be interviewing Dr. Lynn Katai, and we'll be talking about the 27th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights event. She is all things Phoenix Lights. She took the famous video of that incredible UFO, and I can't wait to talk about Phoenix Lights. Dr. Lynn Katai, 1 week from tonight, live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. Have a good week. Thank you for bearing with me tonight. It was a weird start, but a strong finish. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you very much for everything. And watch Resident Alien, hilarious show. I love it very much. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.